You wouldn't think so. Depends on where you go, really. Depends on which circles you frequent.
Well, he impressed a few, I suppose. Just made the fame just as he was sinking. Amazing moment. Another lonely artist walking through the landscape with visions of greatness. He doesn't get recognised until he goes down.
I'd say he's the most misunderstood philosopher.
You mean he didn't understand himself?
More has been written about him that's just flat out wrong than otherwise.
Yeah, I've got an opinion on Nietzsche, which worries quite a few, and that's about his eternal return. I claim that it's his reaction to the Laplace theory. And Laplace was somebody in a very Newtonian fashion. Imagine the entire universe was just a load of small particles bouncing off each other. And Nietzsche worked out that given infinite time, that means at some point all the atoms would come back together and recreate where we are now again and again. And people say, well, he didn't mean that. And
Hmm.
just because he didn't write it that way doesn't mean he wasn't thinking about it, because Nietzsche was a person who felt impelled. He was a scientific mind. He felt impelled to accept the science of his time, but his feelings rebelled against the 19th century worldview. So that was the schism in Nietzsche. He had to believe it. What the scientists were saying must be true, which, we live with the benefit of quantum physics, for example. He had the disadvantage of living with Newtonian physics, but his instincts just completely rebelled against 19th century values.
For good reason.
Oh, DLJ's here.
Recognize any of the participants. Hello to
Chris,
all of you.
Hi, Steve.
how's it going, DLJ? Getting ready for the big moment, the big George?
Oh, later today.
That's
Uh,
that's that's something you'll just remember forever, like an Elvis concert.
what, no comment until it's too early in the morning for me.
Oh, right. Yeah, you're 4 hours behind Melbourne. That's right, with daylight saving.
3 at the moment, I think. But either way, I'm just woken up. So
Well, it was 3, but I think with daylight saving, it's become 4. So, like, it's
no,
almost
it's
12 in Melbourne. What time is it in Malaysia?
8:52. So 3.
Oh, 3 hours. Okay, cool.
Are you hosting this one? I'm getting the impression you're hosting this one.
No, David's a host. I'm just going to go and grab a coffee. Be back in a sec.
To what extent there's a meeting at all, I guess I count as the host. For those who don't know, this is our Friday night, hey, let's read a comic book group. We pick a comic, we read it. I'm going to go ahead and guess that none of the rest of you have read the book we're doing tonight. The book is Introducing Nietzsche by Lawrence Gain. Uh, since none of you have read it, I'm guessing, We can just go ahead and have a general conversation about Nietzsche if you'd like. Or alternatively, we could go over the book page by page if anybody's up for that.
I, I would love to go over it. Unfortunately I wasn't able to read it, but I'm interested to see what it entails.
Sure thing.
Was
Sure
there a
thing.
link on the site?
Hmm?
Was there a link to the book on the site?
No, if anybody wants to be a regular here at our Friday night group, if you need a copy of the book, I can send a digital copy of the book if you ask for it. Just let me know in advance and I'll be happy to send it if available. So here's what I want to do. There. Okay. No, got that wrong. There. There. And there. Okay. Here we are. Okay, so this is our book that we are doing this week, Introducing Nietzsche by Lawrence Kane. Well, I do know Stephen went over it. So, Stephen, what did you think of the book?
I thought that, well, I think I preferred the earlier part of it to the later part of it. But, you know, if you like Nietzsche, it's a nice little way of going through his ideas or having an introduction to his ideas.
I thought so too. It's a very good intro to Nietzsche. If you're a newcomer, if you're a beginner with Nietzsche, this is a good, here we go. Let's give you the rundown of his bio, his background, what he's all about. It's a good intro. It's not that much in depth, but you know, and it's got pictures. Yay.
Well, I haven't seen Nietzsche as the centaur before. That's a new one on me.
Yeah. So it just gives you like a beginner's guide to hit the basics, Nietzsche 101. And you know, I mean if you're starting from zero, this will get you going with Nietzsche.
So
Hope,
can you share this?
hopefully you go on further.
Can you share this in the chat window maybe?
Oh, it's out there, it's available. I'm sure it still must be available, but yeah, you can get a PDF of it.
Thank
If you're starting from zero, this will get you going with him. If you don't know anything about him, this will just give you a quick and breezy rundown of what he's all about. But if you want to go deeper, you're going to have to go to other sources, of course. But I thought it was a good overview. He's pretty complex. I mean, you can only do so much, even in this graphic format. But you know, for what it was and for the limitations that they had, I thought they did a decent job. So yeah, I recommend it if you're just beginning. If you're thirstier for deeper Nietzsche analysis, you'll have to go elsewhere. But it's a good intro. It's 170 pages or thereabouts.
170 pages or thereabouts.
Mute if you're not speaking. Thank you. Yeah, it's just one of those for beginners guides. And as I say, he's one of the most misunderstood philosophers.
Well, of course, he started out often being what he attacked later on. He started out as an idealist. He started out as a rationalist. He worshipped certain personas. He was very much into David Strauss, and then he found David Strauss is not perfect enough. He was very much into Schopenhauer, and then discovered his imperfections, and so he went on. But originally he was sort of an idealist. That was his very early days. He was looking for an ideal, and when all the ideals failed him, he went in the opposite direction, became sort of an anti-idealist in a certain way, or at least he was looking for something different. They do call him, he eventually became what they call a dynamist, a person who believed in power in all things, or potency, you might say. That to be, we have to be potent. We can't be empty sacks. We need a force, whether it's power or life, to make us go.
The will to power. Right.
Okay, so the revision of values, I wonder who preceded him on that, but of course, the 19th century, the Christianity was the grand ideal still. And he looked into the history and decided that the better philosophy had been the master philosophy, and that the slaves had sneakily taken over.
Hard to say
Can
who
you
you're talking
elaborate?
about.
Can you elaborate more on that, Stephen? The slaves have taken over, because I think that's quite relatable.
Well, I imagine a few here would be familiar with Nietzsche's ideas about the master and slave ethics. Of course, he was accusing his contemporary society and Christianity of following a slave ethic, of promoting the weakest over the strongest. Whereas he started to see, well, maybe classical culture was more the ideal. Goethe had popularized classical Greek culture in the modern West some years before. And Nietzsche decided what they were into the highest ideals, the perfect body, the strongest character, the man who achieves. He decided that was more the true set of ideals for a society, which he called the master morality. And he had a theory that the slaves had secretly taken over. Those down the bottom had plotted away for centuries, and they had reversed the values and decided that the powerful man at the top is the oppressor, and it's the downtrodden who are truly virtuous. And so they invented things like Christianity, which represented their set of values, or gradually inculcated their values into what was Christianity. So we're in a culture which says, oh, the ugliest is best, the coward is best, the weak is best, and to him that's slave morality. That's the morality of the underdog, and he had an idea about returning to the values of the overdog.
Someone was mentioning at the beginning that Nietzsche is one of the most misunderstood philosophers. And I wanted to ask, like, Nietzsche was always provocative, right? So when he presented this idea of the Uberman, wasn't it more that he was for shock value, providing an alternative morality from the Christian one, saying that, oh, you could really turn this upside down if you wanted to, because it used to be that way. But his real goal was to find a new path. He didn't say that I want to go back to the old ways. He said that, no, we need people to step up and find new morality, some other path, maybe not either of these two, right? So I think maybe this Übermensch is more a provocative statement just to prove a point that morality could be different than it is in a Christian culture.
Well, in regards to presenting ideals, he did warn people not to become his followers.
Because I heard recently about Darwin being misunderstood, right? Like when he said survival of the fittest, he doesn't mean the strongest. He means the survival of those that best fit into the system. So are you fit for this environment? Are you fit for this system? Which often mean, are you fit to collaborate with everyone else in the system? It doesn't mean, are you strong enough to kill everyone else? Then no one will survive. So fit can mean really, do you fit in? And maybe that's the path as well that you could take here. The Uberman could be the person that learn how to fit in any environment rather than the strong guy who just bullies everyone or kills.
Well, in contradiction to that, Darwin, of course, himself wasn't proposing Darwinism as its, or social Darwinism. That wasn't his ideal. His name was taken. I think it was actually somebody else who used the term survival of the fittest. But this is the fact.
Darwin.
This is the fact about nature, that nature, as far as we can see, has revealed that indeed those beings with the strongest life continue, and those who are not strong enough in terms of life die out.
So it's basically saying the ones who survive, survive. Like strongest doesn't mean that you have more muscles or that you are oppressing more people. Because like Christianity or religion has proven for the human race is that only the humans that joined these groups and collaborated survived, because there is very few cultures that doesn't have these religions that have survived. So it doesn't, like, fitness doesn't really mean that you are strong or that you're oppressing anyone else, right? It just means that you fit in and that you manage to survive.
Well, he didn't, by strength, he meant potency, will, or life force. Not that you had the biggest muscles. Or, you know, for example, you have creatures with smaller muscles and they fit into a niche. Yeah, that's quite true. But let's take the human society that, well, for example, this is this modern genetics thing, like, for example, Europe. Sometime between about 400 AD and 900 AD in Dark Ages Europe, 90% of the genetic lines in Europe disappeared. So I don't know, were the ones that survived the fitter ones? I don't know. But look what the Dark Ages brought. It gave us, in the end, Shakespeare. It gave us Leibniz. It gave us men of superior intelligence. And of course, now that the West has been very successful and everybody survives, we're going downhill. Well, that's my opinion. Chris, free feel to contradict it.
No, I was just putting it out there for other people to run with. I don't know. I mean, I obviously think that, yeah, fit definitely means that you fit in, as opposed to that you can somehow, that you're stronger or that you can oppress other people the way that Christianity, or like, I guess the Uberman would be more a vision of the oppressor being the survivor. But I don't think Nietzsche was really advertising that we should all become oppressors and that we should all become like Napoleon and these, strong people that like wars and want to
He
be
didn't
brave.
really feel the Uberman was present. He believed that the Uberman is something that would evolve in the future. He didn't view himself. as an Uberman. At the very best, he only viewed himself as a forerunner and others as forerunners. But that's the question. Will we be replaced by the Uberman in the future, just like if you've ever seen the film Zardoz, John Borman quite explicitly put that idea in the film. Oh, well, Will's there.
Question. Do we, like in today's society, kind of lean toward the gray area of that, of trying to fit in versus trying to fit in certain aspects of society versus trying to be the individual, the unique one?
Yeah, well, being the unique one can come at a cost. And, you know, as evolution and the survival of the fittest, sometimes the fittest in human society is that which just keeps their head down and goes along with the masses. They pass on the most genes. That's why the major proportion of humans are morons, because it's the best way to get your genes into the next generation is to just keep the status quo. Don't be an individual, I would argue.
Well, let's put it this way. If you, well, this might be a little bit off topic, but let's say that you weren't able to make the next generation and you're just here because, you're just here because of a reason. Like, for instance, off topic, I can't have a child. So I'm just here and I'm the last generation of me. So what does that say for me? Where am I within that context? Where if I had to, write or explain to somebody, like say my purpose or whatever, or fit within Nietzsche's philosophy, where would I fit? Where could I fit if I was to put myself in a category?
Well, you're still in the game if reincarnation is true.
But what if I've given up on that idea?
On the idea of reincarnation?
No, I'm sorry, not a reincarnation, but like if I can't pass on my genes and I can only pass on my thoughts and my ideals and what I've learned to others, and I know that, when I pass on, all there will be is just my ideas, then what will I get out of it? I know I'll come back, but I'll come back with a clean slate. I won't remember. I won't be able to go, oh, okay, well, I influenced that person, or I said something to that person and they acted on it and it gave them a good path, or it put them on the
well, basically in the longer term, if you believe Darwinism, that you possess qualities which belong to your tribe, but it will be your close relatives which will pass on the useful genes, since you didn't. They claim that part of the reason people don't have children is urban civilization. They claim it has a depressive effect on that sort of aspect of human nature. Will still wanted to speak?
Oh, yeah, I just wanted to say it's a little bit of a digression. I'll keep it brief. It's on evolution and the selective traits, behavioral traits. And it was a Sir David Attenborough documentary I was watching last night called Planet Earth 3. And they were showing bowerbirds. And the male bowerbird, he produces a beautiful nest with aesthetic value as it pleases the female. And he collects shells. He puts dozens of shells in a lovely little pile, and then he gets some blueberries and puts those in a beautiful pile next to the shells, with the idea being that the females will come along and they'll inspect the male's nests, and they will mate with the one who has the best nests, because this appreciation of the aesthetic value of his nest gets passed on. It's inherited by the offspring. So the females inherit the propensity to identify the more aesthetically pleasing nests, and the males inherit the propensity to build the more aesthetically pleasing nests, which is absolutely mind-blowing to consider what sort of dynamics are at play and how somewhere in a universe there is this sense of aesthetics. However, along comes another male. Well, this one is out collecting his shells. This other male comes in, and it was really sad to watch. He just destroyed the first one's nest. He ruins it as much as he can until the other one comes back. Now, if that propensity to destroy the other's nest means he's now wiped out the competition, it gives him a far greater advantage in passing his DNA on. And within his DNA is the propensity to destroy the competitor's aesthetically pleasing nest. And this is a classic example of how behavior is selected for, and indeed it is selected for in human beings, why we cheat, why we lie, why we have animosity towards others without any good reason. It's been selected for over millions of years of evolutionary mammalian selection. And it's utterly fascinating. And when we can see what we're doing, we can deal with it and maybe make the world a better place.
Well, my contention has always been that buried within every individual are all the other types. You know, people say, oh, Adolf Hitler, evil dude. But I would say that there's a little bit of Hitler buried within us. There's a little bit of Stalin there. There's a little bit of the saints as well. There's a whole mixture that will come up at the appropriate moment.
Yeah, spot on.
Well, Natalia.
Yeah, I was gonna.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
That's all right. I was gonna ask, do you think Christianity, in essence, actually destroys culture in the long run, Stephen?
Well, from my standard, I probably don't agree with Nietzsche on that point, because I thought Christianity for a time demonstrated that it was like the bowerbird and built magnificent artworks. Just look at the cathedrals. If that isn't the bowerbird gene, I don't know what is. So it created order. I sport myself as a Neoplatonic pagan, but unlike the other pagans who are very hostile to Christianity, I admire it for its great works. Not that I believe sort of in all these Christian spiritual doctrines, but I admire it for its creativity on the earthly plane. It gave us the universities. It gave us a basis for the modern philosophy. It gave us the basis for modern technology. So not everything about Christianity was bad. I love their music. I love their grand cathedrals.
Oh, it's not so much about the aesthetics. It's more about the values that underpins modern Western society today. You know, like equality for all and giving power to the underdogs, even if it's at the expense of the state. It's sort of mentality, I guess.
Well, Christianity catered for the underdog. It didn't promote the underdog. The Christianity cleverly guarded the top dogs as being the most important. It just didn't throw the underdogs on the scrap heap. The Christianity taught that every soul, even the most downtrodden person, was valuable to their God, whereas other cultures treated the underdog, the person sleeping in the gutter, as rubbish. And Christianity said, no, there's some value there. So, well, they had their good works, they had their monasteries. There was a degree of effort to look after the sick, lame, and poor. They saw a certain necessity in this, but it wasn't absolute. They couldn't have been. No society could support an infinite supply of the downtrodden and poor. There's a limit. They more or less, it was window dressing. They took the poor guy, put him in the hospital, and he died of whatever diseases he had. But it was made to look more civilized, rather than just throwing him on the rubbish heap. It was window dressing.
Well, that's kind of interesting because I know that in Buddhism, like each person, like they own their own deed, so everyone's responsible for what they've done. So the concept of just, having somebody to redeem your sins is quite kind of foreign.
Oh, right. Yeah, I'm in agreement with the Christians that I think that humans are a very sophisticated animal, very clever, but they're not gods.
Yeah, true.
They can't rise. There's a limitation in humans to rise to the grand ideals. Only a god could promote that. See, I believe in God. I don't sort of believe in the grand ideal of the Christian hierarchy. I believe, well, the Christian God's just one God amongst the whole lot. I sort of view the Christian God as being a real entity, but just one amongst the many.
Well, doesn't everyone like to be, like the idea of having a father looking after them?
Yeah, it's a hard transition. Kierkegaard would point out that most people are children. They're just interested in their own belly button, and they would prefer somebody else to take the responsibility and somebody else to give them direction. And assuming your own responsibility and creating your own direction is a hard task.
See, like I said earlier, like in Buddhism, like each person's responsible for their deed. So it's sort of like, the Gnostics, where they believe that, if you meditate hard enough or long enough, you'd be able to find that inner knowledge that has been in you. But with the Christians, it takes God to unlock the Holy Spirit that has already been inside you.
Yeah,
You
well,
just
Christianity, you're incapable of saving yourself ultimately. In the long run, you will not be able to save yourself.
Question. Do you think society has evolved?
Sorry, Elizabeth. Elissa has a hand up at the moment. I'll put you after Elissa if you like.
Sorry.
Elizabeth.
Hey, thanks. So, well, I had an idea to bring up, and then the conversation kind of went in a different direction. But we're talking about egalitarianism, and individuality. I was thinking about his kind of description of the last man in Thus Spoke Zarathustra, right, where they live in this perfect egalitarian world where everything is understood and everything is understood as good, and anybody who disagrees is basically diagnosed with a mental illness. And these people are the most contemptible, drinking their medicine for joy at the end of every day. And I remember, and it's been a long time since I read this book, Zarathustra, but him kind of talking about, don't just shoot your arrows, for the mark, but shoot them in every direction, as kind of being the act of the Uberman, which I believe, and I could be definitely wrong in understanding this, but kind of this essence of creating your own values. Not that the values part, because I'm about to switch to Kierkegaard for a moment, is relevant to Kierkegaard because he was deeply religious and also very Christian, but he had the same sort of bent, which was challenging this rationalism, or specifically that was coming out of Christendom in Denmark. That was kind of leveling, or the term that he uses is leveling from the present age, where if you have this construct, these universalities or these abstract notions, you start to reduce or remove individuality. And he actually uses Christianity as a way to well, I believe it's like Lutheranism, to bring back through that subjectivity and internal relationship with God, to both have a society where everybody is treated as creatures under God, but are not equal. But I do find it interesting that both Nietzsche and, of course, Kierkegaard do actually become influential in National Socialism. And I obviously not to the full agreement of either of their theories, but this against like rationality, against principles of the Enlightenment, against Hegel's sort of pursuit of this progressive history, that you kind of get these, or that they ended up utilizing these ideas and becoming very important to their political project. Anyway, so those are my comments.
Yeah, well, Nietzsche himself would have despised National Socialism. He despised the Germany he saw going in that direction. He despised the bigoted nationalism that was surrounding Wagner. He
Oh,
was
for sure.
possibly attracted to it a little bit at
Yeah.
first, and then revolted against it. To him, this was a death of culture.
Yeah.
It
Because I
was,
think, oh, sorry.
oh yeah,
Go
go
ahead.
on.
No, because I think I had read at some point that he was friends with Wagner. And Wagner obviously very influential, or influenced by Gobineau. And actually, I found it interesting because Gobineau had written in his Origins of Inequality of the Races, he actually talks about the last men in his work. And there are some relationships to terminology, not necessarily like full scope of concept, but terminology back to Gobineau as well. I do think that, like from what I've read, that he would not, in agreement with you, have utilized or agreed with National Socialism, just as much as I don't think that Kierkegaard would have agreed with National Socialism either, by any stretch of the imagination. But I find it interesting that the pieces of their philosophies that were used, right? Whether they were used appropriately is another matter, but find that particular interest or that history interesting.
Well, Hegel was the massive influence for Marxism and fascism and National Socialism. But certainly the interesting thing as far as Germany goes, that they say that during World War One, that any German soldier who was a bit intellectual was either carrying a copy of Schopenhauer's works or Nietzsche's works. So suddenly in World War One, people were getting very, very influenced by their ideas. But I don't think even Schopenhauer would have approved of the National Socialists because he had a doctrine of compassion, even though he felt that we were creatures of the will, that we needed to show compassion to our fellow humanity. So very much the person who laid the groundwork for the dystopias was Hegel. Hegel was a person who was suspicious of the individual, who thought the individual was unimportant. Only the vast overstructures were important.
So back to the part about,
Okay, yeah, Elizabeth, you go on. Yeah.
sorry, back to the part, well, it's a little bit trying to remember. Back to the part where you said, or someone said about Christianity not being for the underdog and being more for the upper crust, I would guess, and how other religions, certain ones, are for the underdog. Do you think that Christianity has evolved a little bit with that idea, or are they still within that idea? Like how Christianity might be at the top and how they have subdivisions of what Christianity could be, in their own philosophy, And have they taken that major idea and splintered it to make it, for everyone? I'm for everyone now.
Well,
Has the time
I
has
was
evolved?
meaning the church in action. Now you could go back to Jesus, and you might say he was, talking about, distributing, giving your wealth to the poor and all that. But no society can run on that basis. So Christianity, as in action, as a church existed, was window dressing, where it made the appearance of looking after the poor. It did do some charitable work, but it realised the strength of society depends on the people at the top being good quality.
Yeah, of course. No, I mean, from then to now, is it still the same concept, or has it tweaked itself a little bit toward, they have the most, so let's go with the most, versus they have little, then we can just, slide them over. We don't see them.
Yeah, well, Christianity uh, looked after the down and outs, but at a very superficial level. There were people doing charitable works, but ultimately they can't look after everybody, and really it's just a band-aid. And the people down the bottom suffered and died, but they just sang nice songs to them, made everything look good.
Well, I mean, so the concept is still present today, you feel,
What's
or
that?
anybody?
You mean some sort of equality, or what is the concept you're talking about? You mean how a society functions? Well, society functions on the strength of those at the top.
Right.
And the people down the bottom, either you pick yourself up or you tend to go under. But society will create a window dressing of charity. So, come along and say, you poor fella, we'll put you in the hospital, and well, you die in hospital.
And him being, what to some societies as gray, because he's so complex with his theories, you could apply it to almost anything and say, oh, well, he had this philosophy and this line applies to him. Would you agree that he would maybe applaud that his theories, being misunderstood as they are still being applied to various subjects? So
Okay,
would you say that?
which particular, you're talking about Nietzsche's theories being applied?
I'm not really sure exactly, but like, say the current one that we're talking about. One of the current ones that we're talking about.
The current ones. Oh, what a particular theory of Nietzsche has been popularized today. Well, I suppose one of it, there was an anti-authoritarian streak in Nietzsche. Maybe that's been applied.
How?
Well, you got the avant-garde class, you go back to the 19th century, people, it was very much a class-orientated culture. You bowed your cap to the guy above you, and in Nietzsche's views, you're all striving to better yourself. So that started to disappear with the popularism in the early 20th century, which did become a more leveled society compared to the previous very class-orientated society. So Nietzsche would just say, to the authority would say, well, obey us, and Nietzsche will say, well, that's just your opinion. I'm just as good as you, potentially.
Couldn't like Nietzsche is known as like the punk philosopher, isn't he? Like he was popular like during the punk era, you know, the 80s and 90s. He got really popular, and now he's even more popular. And I see it mainly as a backlash against postmodernism and political correctness. Like, you know, the punk culture just want to say fuck it all, like we've had enough of this, like you trying to shove your morality and force me and tell me what to do and tell me how to conform to be a good person. There is alternative perspectives that, so this kind of like over moralizing, like he was against using morality as a means of control. And I think that's what people are against, right? When they're against this political correctness, because it
Yeah, I
gets it
think
very,
that one's quite correct. Yeah, yeah. He idolized potency, and I mean, if you're letting yourself get downtrodden in the gutter and squashed, your potency has been destroyed. So you need to sort of pick yourself up and establish your power, so to speak. So in the end, yeah, it's almost could become a war of all against all, unless you had a system that admired the greater man that knew how to appreciate the aesthetics of the leader. I couldn't really say.
because he did say that the Uberman is the person that reevaluates all the values and spread them across people. He said you have to find these new systems that people can actually value. This is what the Uberman's main mission was. That doesn't mean be strong and just take. That's not what he's saying, right? He's saying that the Christian values don't work, the old aristocratic values don't work. We need strong people, confident people that can go against these cultures and create new values that everyone can kind of adopt. And that's the Uberman, right? Who can create these values that other people can adopt, that we can agree on.
Well, it was also self-overcoming. One of Nietzsche's interesting concepts was the idea of revenge. And he felt that to be possessed by revenge was a weakness, which is something I would struggle. You know, I'm more like the Italian. I'm into revenga. But he felt that he was more sort of practical, and you just say, well, that's life. You know, the other guy might step on you. That's life. And in practical concerns, you might have to establish your power and fight the other guy. But his attitude was that you can't, because the other guy fights you for possession of the earth, that doesn't mean the other guy is somehow bad. It's just circumstance.
Yeah, and if you revenge him, that's just a sign of weakness. Because if a child does something to you or a mosquito, like if you get angry and upset and let them affect you, then they are controlling you. So you should aim to be so strong that you're not trying to revenge or squash them. You are going to strive to be unaffected by them, right? So yeah,
I
he's
might
not
have
really.
to give Elle a chance. Elle, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I had a question. What do you think about his sister? Because Nietzsche was not that much known during his time himself, and what people know about Nietzsche is through his sister, Elizabeth. And he lashes at his sister in some of his writing, saying my sister is evil and things like that. So how the sister preserved his work, and um, I don't know much uh, about the sister herself, and
Well, she was looking for people to edit his works. I did read Rudolf Steiner's comments on it. If you've ever heard of Rudolf Steiner, you know, you got the Steiner schools and stuff like that. And at one point, she was wanted him to edit Nietzsche's works, and Steiner was a big Nietzsche fan in a certain sense. But he viewed the sister as basically being ignorant and obstinate. He didn't, Steiner didn't admire the sister at all. So yeah, she perhaps had a simple-minded idea. She was very much caught up in the German nationalist ethic. So yeah, well, I'll probably agree with Steiner that she was one book. She went to South America and one book and came back, and one book called her the obstinate llama. The South American pack animal they get the wool from. So the book was comparing her to a dumb animal who was obstinate, like a mule. So yeah, she doesn't really survive very well with the critics.
Mm. And how about Cosima Wagner? What was her role? Because Nietzsche praises her in some places.
Oh, you mean Wagner's wife?
Yes.
Yeah, I haven't really read much about. I think the thing was that the Wagners treated Nietzsche like the lost son. He was, in a sense, the Peter Pan. He was a boy without a father, so he was looking for a father figure and a mother figure, and Cosima and Richard filled that for him until he got feisty and revolted against them. So he was rebelling against the parent. But yes, of course, even after the breakup, he still had a lot of fond feelings for the Wagners. Django?
Oh yeah, thank you. Fascinating talk. Yeah, so much has been said. Regarding the I just reminded yeah about uh, you know Christianity, for example. I think it would be interesting to contrast how the evolution of the creed from before it became it got supported by the state and after, and how sort of secular motives latches on to the creed. But I think
Okay, Christianity supported by the state is what you mean.
yeah, when once it became a state supported religion,
Constantine.
it caught on to a very different dynamic, and I think somewhat evolved into a different creature. And but I think it's easy to sort of nitpick about the religion today with all its faults. It's not a perfect creed, but it has served its role in establishing the sort of the basis for a lot of ideas that we sort of enjoy today, but apparently without due acknowledgement. I mean, liberalism has drawn a lot from Christianity, I believe. I've been reading a bit about the British Civil War lately, and on how, or even before that, a lot of civic humanism and the Bill of Rights and so on and so forth. The way they drew from the Bible. A lot of ideas are drawing from Christianity, and so I think an appreciation of atheism today would also might sort of requires a bit of acknowledgement of Christianity, of which on which the atheism of today is standing upon.
Well, I'd have to agree there that yes, it's overlooked. If I don't like Christianity or Judaism for that matter, it doesn't matter. Like the Old Testament is one of the great books, and the Old Testament is about people. The Old Testament is about people going wrong. The Old Testament is about people behaving badly. It's actually more honest than a modern communist state. You know, a modern communist state will praise Stalin as the perfect man and Hitler as the perfect man and whatever. But I mean, what does the Bible say about King David and Solomon? The Bible says they screwed up. You know, it's honest. There's an honesty about the bad sides of human nature, and the Old Testament is a warning. This is how you go bad. Watch out.
Yes, it's very resourceful literature from which to draw much of wisdom. Um, and you know, it just happens to be a well kept you know, literature that you know, of which was not as abundant in the times by other written by other creeds, from which today we could draw as much. But nevertheless, that being the case, you know, it has served this role in the evolution of human history and thought. So I think one has to inevitably acknowledge its role in spite of its faults that we might find today.
Well, Constantine made it the official religion of effectively Europe in the long run. And he must have seen some strength in Christian religion, because I conclude it must have been their organization. The Christians were highly organized, and he probably saw that this organization could be useful to the empire. But the fact is that the Christian bishops and all that became lackeys of the empire. They were there in the diocese doing the empire's work. And I would say, I disagree with some views. I would say that probably Christianity prolonged the survival of the Roman Empire. Most people view it negatively. Like I said, I'm not really a Christian. I'm a pagan that admires Christianity for its good points.
Yes, right. And you know, the thing is that after it became official through Constantine and whatnot, I believe there is it kind of got transformed into something else from its original experience, and
Yeah,
I think that
power
is where.
corrupts. They
Excuse me?
got power.
Yes, and then once it becomes sort of the convention or the orthodox, then you know, and then the secular interest latch on to, you know, extract whatever interest there is to extract, and you know, fast forward, it sort of becomes the target of the so-called it becomes the so-called establishment, of which people you know, start to complain about. And then you have this regeneration of you know, let's get back to the fundamentals and the essentials, and the uncorrupted essentials, and then you have the Reformation and so on. So I think Nietzsche, in that regard, in terms of the big picture of evolution of ideas, I think he has his insights as to the need to reevaluate whatever context we happen to find ourselves in terms of the conventional and the orthodoxy.
Yeah,
And
I probably, I think Jan's been waiting very patiently.
Oh, no, it's fine.
I think we'll have to give Jan a chance.
okay. Yeah, sure.
I just had I want to talk about Nietzsche's concept of, I think it's amor fati.
Oh, okay, the love of fate.
Yeah. But before I make remarks about that, I back to Nietzsche's sister. I always understood that she kind of threw Nietzsche under the bus vis-a-vis her making available, his literature for the Nazis to co-opt, for their, I don't know, their brand, that she really helped them do that because she was a supporter.
That was, yeah, late in the piece when Hitler came to power. She
Pardon?
did,
Yeah.
she did promote, she complained to Hitler that her brother had been ignored.
Oh,
And
well,
so in the official doctrine, Nietzsche became one of the Nazi saints, but of course they couldn't have read his works very closely. Of course, his position on anti-Semitism, not so much that he felt it was morally wrong, he just viewed it as stupid.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, this is his whole point. He felt he was overthrowing Zarathustra. Zarathustra was the one that really brought up the doctrine of a universal war between good and evil. And so we always say, hey, I'm the good guy, and those guys over there, they're the bad guys. And I've got all the virtues. I'm wonderful. And look at those guys over there, they eat cats. I love cats. I'm good. Those guys over there, they eat cats. They're evil. And this is what Nietzsche wanted to move away from, this sort of extremism. And he blames Zarathustra for it.
Yeah, it's very interesting the way his Übermensch was kind of co-opted by the Nazis, and now whenever people hear Übermensch, it's immediately what they think of. They think of Nietzsche as a Nazi.
Well,
But yeah, go
his
ahead.
Übermensch meant self-overcoming first and foremost.
Yeah,
Ceasing to be a slave of yourself.
right. But accepting your fate. I mean, I think that's such an interesting idea of his, which kind of segues into I think he was an anti-free will. He was more of a determinist.
Yeah, that's his statement on the matter. Yeah.
Which that whole area of, is there do we have free will? I mean, there's a very specific way of talking about that idea of determinism and, lack of free will. But
well, at his time,
accepting your fate as a Stoic, the Stoics kind of were the propagators of that idea as well.
Well, at the time, the dominant scientific theory of the universe was Newtonian with that of Laplace, the astronomer, if you've ever heard of Laplace.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he was the one that conceived of the cosmos as being a huge clockwork machine with the atoms just bouncing off each other. And because Nietzsche had a scientific mind, that was a scientific belief of the time. that the whole cosmos, if you're an atheist, the whole cosmos was just one big machine that was predestined.
Mm.
That's where I feel, and then people will attack me for this, is that I feel that's where he got his idea of eternal return.
Mm.
Because if you accept that theory, which was what everybody believed in the 19th century, or the top scientific minds, the universe is just a big machine.
But
Well,
isn't determinism and what did you say earlier? Isn't and predestination are kind of two different. I mean, I understand determinism to be something like you can harken back to take your personal life, for example. Everything up until this point was kind of building on what is happening right now, and you really don't have any other choice because what you are doing now was determined retroactively by the moment of your birth or the moment of your parents' birth. But I don't know if that's the same as predestination.
well, a material predestination would be the case if you believe the universe is just all these atoms bouncing off each other, that if you could calculate it, you would know the future. This, I think, and people attack me for this, that Nietzsche was very depressed by the scientific view of the time. And that science, if you take it to its endpoint, if the universe is sort of has infinite time, for example, they used to believe, well, it's infinite time. This wasn't the 20th century. That eventually we would all reoccur. That the atoms would come back together, because we're given infinite time. We must have had this discussion in the past. The atoms came apart, and then in the future time, after an infinite amount of time, they come back together and we're having this discussion again. And I feel that Nietzsche was really depressed by this idea.
Mm.
He took it to its end. Most people, well, isn't it a fact that we will often act instinctively? We think we're acting out of choice, and yet we pull ourselves up and we notice that we're just falling into the same old habits. We think we're free. I think Nietzsche inwardly was fighting with that whole idea of predetermination. He felt it had to be true, but his instincts, his feelings revolted against it. And that was the story of his life.
I just wanted to ask, isn't that partly, well, I mean, I know that it was definitely a theory of the time, like that determinism, but how, in what way is that related to Schopenhauer, or is it kind of manifested and changed over time? Because I remember when I was reading The Will to Power, one of the last entries, he kind of gives this description of the will, and he talks about eternal recurrence. And it reminded me so much of Schopenhauer's description of, kind of the will, this eternal metaphysical force that, I mean, for him is free in and of itself, but, as it acts out through the world, creates determined essential beings that's constantly in a state of self-consumption. And his description of eternal recurrence, in particularly in The Will to Power, because I know he has different descriptions of it in different works, reminded me so much of Schopenhauer. So I was kind of wondering if maybe you could speak to that.
Well, Schopenhauer felt that, well, for example, we think we're free. For example, as a 17-year-old boy, I thought sex with women was the greatest thing in the universe. But now that I'm much older, my my feelings have sort of like changed a whole lot. So Schopenhauer had this view that we're driven by urges, sex, consumption of food, all the stuff that makes us live or expands life, but we're just the fool in the matrix. Oh, I want to be emperor of the universe, and I like women, therefore I'll have a huge number of sex slaves. Well, from Schopenhauer's point of view, you're just a sucker. You're just being sucked in by your drives. And in a sense, it's very difficult to overcome. He was one who was very similar to the Buddha, and he believed in overcoming the drive of the will, and that was your closest thing to freedom. But ultimately, you're just a speck of dust. You're going to come in and you're going to go out. But people go around. Oh, look, I want a flash car, so I can attract all these females and blah 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 and blah blah blah. And
Yeah.
Schopenhauer say, "You sucker, you fool, you've been led along by your drives and instincts. You're a slave to your drives and instincts." But why would you
Yeah.
waste the time, getting married and stuff like that? Schopenhauer never got married.
No, but he did love his poodles.
Yeah. Well, he obviously found pets less aggravating than humans. But I mean, the difference between Schopenhauer and Nietzsche, that I think Nietzsche experimented with his ideas. He was a devotee of Schopenhauer, but Nietzsche knocked around. He went and met fairly ordinary people in the latter stages. He just didn't stay in the ivory tower. I mean, Schopenhauer was a person who just remained in the ivory tower, basically.
Okay. Thank you.
I can ask a simple question if we sort of reached a standstill. I'm not sure, Stephen, if you wanted to say.
Go ahead.
Which I'm showing my ignorance, but did Nietzsche have an opinion on the meaning to life? And as I say, I'm probably showing my ignorance of this subject, but I'm just curious, what did he have the stand on the meaning of life, what we should actually do, what our endeavors should be?
His opinion was you make your own meaning.
Beg your pardon?
His opinion was you make your own meaning.
Right, so it's purely subjective.
Well, sort of not exactly. I'll probably take Goethe's point. Now, he broke it down. He said, there's Christianity and it has this thing, the logos. And what the logos means is the message. So if you're a real Christian, you get the message. So there's a meaning for the Christian in the message. But if you like Hegel, then you think ideas is it, or your Hegel or Kant. Ideas, man, that's what it is. And of course, you see Nietzsche is actually a bit of a revolted against idealism. And this was another one that Goethe talked about. He talked about a philosophy where you follow power, the will. And then ultimately he talked about the lowest form of philosophy was that of actuality, following the deed. So Nietzsche, Schopenhauer, Max Stirner were philosophies of potency rather than ideas. So, you know, saying, yeah, you can give me all the ideas you like. Yeah, that's a very nice idea. Yeah, I like that one. I'll put that one on my window shelf. Yeah, I like that little idea. It's very cute. This was probably how Nietzsche ended up with ideas as values. He thought, yeah, it takes more. He sort of saw the idea as a puff of wind, and it takes potency to make things work. Whether I agree with that, partly I do, I don't know. Goethe was actually making a warning. He said, when you go from the message and you reduce it to ideas, and then you reduce from ideas to power, and then even worse, Marx comes along and reduces from potency and power to actuality, watch out. You could be running into trouble. Well, you look at Christianity, and I think one of the fascinating things, and I think Goethe picked up on this, is that the word was the message. So the message appeared in ancient Judea in their mythic narrative. And what happened to the message? Jesus was the literal incarnation of the message, according to the Christians. What did they do to the message? They shot the messenger. I think this is one you've got to watch out. You know, a guy comes along and says, you should go like that rather than like this. And that upsets some people. So you can either say, well, that's a very nice message, thank you, but I'll continue going like this. But some people can't stand that. They feel impelled to follow the instruction. Like, you know, Will's probably got a little note in front of him saying, keep away from girls and keep away from beer. And he never follows the message, but it doesn't mean you have to screw up and throw away the message. You can know that it's probably smarter to keep away from girls and keep away from beer. But it's better to continue with your bad habits and keep the sticker on the wall warning you about your bad habits than taking that message and hiding it because you don't like what it says. That's the absolute weakness. And we see it in our society all the time. And it's getting worse. People are too thin-skinned to hear something they don't like. Oh, you know, he said something to me that upset my feelings. Oh, that's death itself. No, it isn't. If I get a brick and smash it into your head, that's really hurting you. But if I say to you something unpleasant, yeah, it's just going to bounce off, isn't it? It's your own choice. If you're so weak that you can't take a few harsh words, I know it's nice to have nice words, but I'm more worried about a brick being slammed into my head than a few words. Well, here's my little piece. Django, what do you got to say?
Oh, yes. Speaking of bricks hitting your head, I think you know, Schopenhauer was, if I can step back a bit, Schopenhauer was inspired by Indian text, ancient Indian creeds, such as, you know, Hinduism, Upanishads, Bhagavad Gita, and so on. And from which you can detect from his The World as Will text, you can sort of see the Hinduism speaking.
The world is will and representation.
Oh yeah, the world as will. Yeah. And you know, I mentioned this in light of a comment that I read that when a soldier was about to smack the brains out of a local Indian. The Indian is said to have, commented how in how marvelous ways, in how marvelous ways the universe manifests itself. In the moment, the few seconds before his brains were about to get smashed by the butt of a rifle. I believe he said that comment in the sense that even though this vicious guy in front of me is about to kill me, it's part of the manifestation of this big universe, and so I should embrace this act because
Oh, okay, the love of fate.
yeah, and so when I imagine that scenario, I can't help but to think, um, uh, okay, we can have a lot of thoughts about the meaning of life and predestination and destination and fate and all that, but ultimately, wouldn't you rather be on the giving end than on the receiving end in this world, in this
So you would rather
instance?
be a hammer than a nail,
Yes.
like in the
So
song.
yeah, okay, I take it that all is part of the universe working itself out, so we should be embracive about it. But while living in this moment, I would rather be the person calling the shots than being the slave of other forces. And so, with that question, I think it sort of leads to the question of the here and now, which I would argue it's related to the logic of power. And we could draw in some maybe some thoughts on Nietzsche on this because although it sort of digresses a bit to the general discussion today, I kind of have a question of what people think about the fact of of uh, of uh, of drawing in the reality of this life in terms of the dynamics of power, so to speak. In that we have to acknowledge the workings of power in our lives, such that we might as well rather enjoy by being able to use the power as opposed to be in the receiving end of power and have a miserable life. Although I might claim to have a profound spirituality, I would not. I would rather not be in the gutter of a ghettos, begging, worrying about the next piece of bread for to fill my belly. And I say this uh, in light of the fact that the acknowledgement of the secular forces is just as important as the spiritual matters that we sort of think about. And I think, what if I say that if the secular forces is relevant, nevertheless, to this immaterial matter that we discuss about, in that these ideas that we talk about, if we sort of relate to the secular powers, the material powers, and whatever ideology or thought that enhances that the secular power is ultimately a good outcome after all. Now, I'm sorry, I'm kind of digressing a bit, but let me, if I can just, in short, my question is, what do you think is um, um, the right way to sort of adapt to real life? What would be a good guidance to adapt to the real life such that it enhances my standing in real life, my power in real life, and for me to be able to enjoy a good life but not a life without an abundant life, and what is there to draw upon from the writers that we have been discussing today.
Well, he'd probably say an exercise of the will. One thing I think I picked up with Nietzsche is he was very much opposed to absolute passivity. He accused, I see it sort of, perhaps it's a little bit disguised, but he was accusing his fellow philosophers of being passive. They just like their good job in academia, they get a job in school, and they're not really interested in testing the boundaries of philosophy. And so, well, if you want to be, you can be a follower, you can do your easy job, go home, watch all your favorite romances on TV to pass the time. But Nietzsche seemed to be saying that that passivity can become a living death. And so he's talking about an exercise of power where you try to seek in some way, no matter how insignificant, an exercise of your own will, of your own potency.
But what of the comment made by a gentleman before, fitting into the flow, the bandwagoning, and just not sticking out, and going home, watching my sitcom or whatnot, living just a inauspicious life, is after all helpful to the propagation of my species, because I'm not making any troubles for myself.
Well,
not
Chris,
disturbing anything.
Chris is going to have to write his book, Fitting In, so we can all read it and then critique it.
It's my comment that like the one who keeps his head down will pass on more DNA, just goes with the flow.
Yeah. So, wouldn't that be a wise strategy of life, to just sort of not stick out, just go with the flow, and be sort of politically correct, if
Yes
that is
and
the
no.
requirement?
Yes and no. You can demonstrate, for example, say in Stalinist Russia, if you were good at keeping your head down, you became the survivor, because the people that stuck their heads out were the ones that got locked off. But in the long run, it can be the case that your whole way of things ultimately lacks potency, so your line dies out. At some point or other, the stronger one will overpower the weak. When the weak have become too weak, when they've well, this is what's happened in Western society. Look at our ancestors, who were out there conquering the American plains. And look at what we've become now. It's a picture given in Easy Rider, that at a certain point, Western civilization went from being the conqueror to the Easy Rider. It had built a really great system, and in Peter Fonda's film, you just had these guys who thought, well, I can't be bothered with anything. I'm just going to enjoy myself and please my own belly button, so to speak. And this proves to be a problem, because what happens is the Easy Riders become their own downfall. The Easy Riders, when they go to the redneck town and they pick up Jack Nicholson, and because they've upset the rednecks find where they've been camping and beat them up and accidentally killed Jack Nicholson. Well, what do Peter Fonda and the other guy do? They decide, well, oh, this looks like a problem, so they abrogate their responsibilities. The responsibility would have been to go to the cops about the murder, and the rednecks would have been picked up, and they said, no, let's just get on our bikes. And he gave us these tickets to a whorehouse in New Orleans. We don't want to lose out on our fun. And I mean, if we go and check with the cops, it's just going to be a big problem for us. So they bury him and just leave him behind. But of course, the irony is at the very end of the film, they get picked off by rednecks. So somebody else down the line who hadn't exercised responsibility and saw to it that the rednecks were picked up for their bad behavior had settled their fate. This is actually getting very Kierkegaardian. Kierkegaard talks about exercising responsibility. And of course, famously, Tarantino makes a film called Once a Time in Hollywood. He picked up on that, and that was the point where his pair of idiots, he has a happy ending where his idiots wake up just enough to prevent Sharon Tate's murder. So that was sort of a happy ending. But Tarantino, he's gone conservative. He's realised that the modern America has deserted its responsibilities, and it's not going to be a happy end. Lisa, you've got your hand up?
Yeah, I just I wanted to read something from the Gay Science, which is relevant to what you're saying, but it's section 25. He says, there's a stupid humility that is by no means rare, and those afflicted with it are altogether unfit to become persons of knowledge. For as soon as a person of this type perceives something striking, he turns on his heel, as it were, and says to himself, you have made a mistake. Where were your senses? This cannot be the truth. And then instead of looking and listening more keenly again, he runs away as if intimidated from the striking thing and tries to shake it from his mind as fast as possible. For his inner canon says, I want to see nothing that contradicts the prevalent opinion. Am I made to discover new truths? There are already too many old ones.
Abrogation of responsibility.
Yeah.
Excuse me for a sec. I'm just gonna do.
So what is it, Alisa, in 2 words, in 2 sentences, in layman terms? What's the takeaway of that paragraph that you just read to us?
Well, I mean, from what I understand, and just in response to, I think, kind of your comments earlier about whether or not, living a life where you keep your head down and just kind of go with the flow, maintaining the prevalent opinion. And that also individuals who have this kind of, I'm at a loss of words right now, have this kind of way about them, not challenging the status quo, not thinking for themselves, thinking that they're incapable of thinking for themselves, and just maintaining the system at B, aren't actually people who are, obviously seeking knowledge. They aren't people who are capable of seeking knowledge. I think for that particular statement, of course, there's a lot more in the Gay Science, where he talks about the differences between what he would classify as an intellectual versus, what people think of themselves as being intellectual and such. So
But in
it just
terms of,
reminded me. Oh,
yes,
sorry.
I get it. I take it. Very well said. But in terms of propagation of species, it's not necessarily a good strategy to insist on, finding truth at whatever cost. Better just get on with the flow and make babies. because eventually down the road, down a few generations, who knows, one of your babies might come up with some, unless we, there's a change in the paradigm of life. I think the safe bet would be just have more babies. Who will have more babies and so on,
Can I
as a default strategy. What would you say to that argument?
Well, I mean, if the fundamental ends of life is just to propagate the species, then I suppose maybe not. I do think that there's value in people who think against the prevalent opinion, because I think it was mentioned previously by the person who left or wherever they have gone. That can also be very dangerous, right? Just I mean, politically speaking, just keeping your head down and maintaining the status quo. I mean, when I think about Hannah Arendt, for example, and her theory, or the banality of evil, when she talks to Eichmann, he was just a person who kept his head down and maintained the status quo and just became an unthinking object. I mean, of course, this is her opinion. Like, there's lots of counters to this, but he wanted to move up and he was doing his job. Sure, he was, capable of propagating the species, continuing under this particular political system. But that particular political system was dangerous and destroyed, lots of people, destroys nature, right? So I think that there's a balance that needs to be played between just maintaining the status quo, while also being cognizant and rational and using your reason, because a state is only as good as its leaders and its policies. That's kind of what I would maybe consider with that. And again, it would be an kind of a refusal to take responsibility. So.
Okay, point well taken. I think I don't know where the host just went off, but Buddy has his hand up. I think
Yes, I was just gonna say it sounds like you guys are just going way complicated. It sounds pretty simple. Great power come with great responsibility, Peter Parker. All right, somebody rip you off. You could have stopped him. He did not go. He robs and kills your uncle, which is a sole breadwinner of your family, plunders your family into poverty. All of this you could have stopped simply stopping the robbery in the first place. As simple as this, okay? You could stop and prevent it by being a productive and responsible person, stopping a robbery, just because you don't like the guy because he ripped you off, you let him go. You caused something else. Now, your family is in a misfortune. This is just an example. I'm just saying, it sounds like you guys just going way harder academia about it. But, they did a movie. We saw great power come with great responsibility right there. Layman's term. This is why you should be good. Because it's a ripple effect. If you don't do something, bad thing happen to you, it's the same thing. Does that make a better explanation?
I understand that with power comes responsibilities. But what new is in terms of but yeah, so what else is new? I mean, stopping I mean, if
You
someone
should
is
be,
attacking, I
you
mean,
should
the
stand
liberty.
up. Yes, that's what I'm saying. Think of it this way. When you examine the relationship between a nail and a hammer, like you said before, you rather be the hammer, right?
Yeah.
Rather than be the nail. But if you come think of it, without the hammer, the nail is useless.
Yeah.
Like it's completely useless. What are you gonna do? You just obsolete yourself by not being what I'm saying? There's an intricate relationship, and just as a society, as later on organization talks about, there is a way of structuring, and in order to this work, you do have to put in responsibility, especially for a free democratic society, right? Rather than, like a pope, like before he's examined all the power in one place, or, hereditary rules, is unfair. It's like old Bible, he's saying it's unfair, right? It's because they pass by blood and so on and so on. They saying we got a new system, but everybody has to do its part, right? Sometimes you just have to be the nail. But if you come think of it, science has proven that when a hammer hits a nail, equal amount of force.
Okay, now, you know, to put it in another context for the sake of illustration, when we say power in today's context, isn't like economic power one of the most effective indexes of measurement of power? Either, I mean, it's just a commonsensical idea that economic power translates to power, and so if that's the case, and that being the case, what is it? Whatever that promotes that economic power, is a good is a positive thing, and so in terms of fitting in type of idea, and responsibilities with power idea, as long as it's a positive contribution to the grand scheme of enhancing my economic power, or my group's economic power, or my nation's economic power, is a good thing. I say this because the more I read about history, it seems that what ultimately matters is the power, the means, the economic power, and all these great philosophies and great stuff, ideological stuff, is not only enjoyed better by a good living, comfortable living, and but it matters more in terms of a material condition. So do you see is there any relation? Am I forcing a relation between good philosophy and material well-being? Is that a irrelevancy that or is there any relevance, or do you see any connections? Or yes, finally, our
It's
host
a bit long-winded, Django. It's a little bit hard to follow. So what's your basic principle?
Yeah. So my assumption here is sort of like the concept of game theory, and in that there are proven ways to play the game theory, in which ultimately you don't come out from the losing end, but stay in the winning end of the game theory. And I think that
well, that's very rational of you.
yes, and whatever does promote a more
But it doesn't
wise
always
playing
work.
in the game. Excuse me.
Well, playing by the rules can work a lot of the time, and then unfortunately, sometimes you have to ditch the rules. I'm not saying because I approve of that, but that's just the way things work. if you became completely orientated to a set of rules, you've put yourself in a straitjacket. You'd agree with that, Will?
Say it again. Sorry, I was just looking at it.
Well, you know, people talk about the rules and adhering absolutely to a set of rules. Like, that's a bit like Les. This is one of the points I disagree with. And my point there is that if everybody absolutely adhered to a set of rules, they would be living in a straitjacket. They would destroy their potency. You would end up with a creature who's hollow.
But is that so? Again, pardon my ignorance. Is deontological philosophy about having sort of just a nucleus of a moral compass in which you apply to each situation without having a set of rules? Like, for instance, you know, try not to cause unnecessary suffering. Is that deontological? I've probably got that wrong. I've got that very wrong, haven't I? Is it? I can't think of the type of philosophy where instead of having a set of rules, you just have a sort of a basic premise.
Yeah, so let me, can I respond quickly?
Please do.
If someone comes to knock on your door and is looking for your friend, I mean, they're looking for your friend, and your friend is hiding in your room, and the authorities or whoever, they come knocking on your door to find your friend. And are you to lie to them, or just because of your principles of never lying are going to tell them that your friend is hiding in your room? I think that's a situation that people apply to Kant. And apparently Kant says you should never lie.
There you go. The absolute rationalists.
Yeah. So I'm not sure if I'm going to unquestionably follow that principle. I think it's situational. It's contextual.
Shoot yourself in the foot.
Yes. And
you know, so even in Anglo-Saxon law, you can't be compelled to incriminate yourself.
Oh yes, and one of the merits of common law principles, I find, is that it is based on experience, tradition, based on experience, and what has worked so far. So I find that quite interesting, as compared to, say, principle-based law, where whatever case there is, you apply the principles and then decide on the case. Whereas you have another way of approaching it, which is what has worked before and what has been our tradition, and then apply thereof. So, but I'm digressing. But yes, I think maybe, I don't know if that sort of says a bit about what the question of Will had about whether to sort of stick to the principles or to study the context.
I just looked it up, and what I was trying in my garbled way to say was virtue ethics. That's what I was thinking of, was virtue ethics as opposed to deontology. So just trying to sort of cultivate the right sort of attitude that you are acting in a virtuous way without a strict set of rules, which would, in relation to Stephen's first comment or question, would apply to, it's a much more flexible way to go about things. You don't have set rules. Like, what do I do in this situation? If someone is attacking me, and I always go to Rule 3, subsection 2, clause A. turn the other cheek. You know, whatever the rule might be, you just evaluate it according to your basic virtue ethics, which would be don't cause unnecessary suffering, maybe. In which case you punch him in the mouth.
Let
Because you,
justice be done, though the heavens fall.
If you say, if you assume that Confucianism is a sort of a virtue ethics based on a virtue ethics idea, the problem there is, and what you have today is that too much lack of the principles. In other words, when, for example, when the British passed on Hong Kong to mainland, the governor of Hong Kong at the time said, so you're going to rule Hong Kong. They asked the China counterpart, so you're going to rule Hong Kong by law, right? And
Well,
by
you're going
rule
to
of law,
respect Hong Kong's autonomies.
autonomy with the rule of law. And the Chinese counterpart said, "Of course, we're going to rule. We're going to rule Hong Kong with laws." And
Yeah,
you
well,
know,
the wolf said to me, "I'll take care of your sheep."
yes, yes,
I
The
wanted,
wolf took care of the sheep
uh-huh.
in Hong Kong. But I don't think the British probably had a great deal of choice. You know, if the Red China wanted to start a war, Hong Kong would have probably been an easy victory.
but
Like
was Django
Taiwan
Yes.
isn't. Taiwan's going to be a very hard victory if Red China tries it.
But was Django making a point? He
Yeah,
didn't.
yeah. So it went down to the semantics of it. In other words, between rule by law and rule of law. And what the Chinese counterpart understood was rule by law. And the Chinese were obviously confident that they could rule the Hong Kong by law, no problem, he said. But the Hong Kong governors, the British Hong Kong governor was saying, no, it's rule of law. And the Chinese counterpart, oh yeah, don't worry, we will rule by law. So the point here is that the Chinese counterpart did not understand the difference of rule of law and rule by law.
Okay,
And this
one's
is,
the tyranny and the other's democracy. Democracy is the rule of law,
yes,
and tyranny's the rule by law.
exactly, yeah. And so in our context today is that rule of law is the idea of principles. Although virtue is a good thing, you still need some principles. And so this is it's a more transcendent idea, the transcendent concept that that is sometimes applicable to real life, as sort of idea. And that the problem that I see, this is a personal opinion, of China is that this rule, this principle beyond the head of any human beings, this idea is not really taking hold in their paradigm of life. And I think this is one of the examples of the problems when you do not sort of allow principles its proper role in your outlook.
Well, thanks for that. I'll be sure in the future to always say, rule by law, mine.
Excuse me, rule by law.
Yeah, I'll go for that one. Rule by law, mine. Subject the world to my will.
Well, everyone would want that, wouldn't they? Like everybody would want that, even if they might have absolute benevolent intentions, they still would like to apply their worldview. You can't escape.
It's an aspect of ourselves, yeah, that we want things to go our way, but it can become a trap. If we endlessly have everything go our way, we inwardly become weaker. It's actually only by facing external adversity that we obtain inner strength. Oh, this is the present generation. Oh, don't want to get out of bed, go to school. I want an easy pass mark. All that. Our current generation has gone for the easy ride. That's what they want. And yeah, when I was a kid, I wanted an easy ride. And now I'm a bit older, I'm starting to wake up that the easy ride isn't such a good idea.
Yeah, well, if you get too much of an easy ride, you know, at some point you've got to wake up to the reality that the world is a harsh place, I guess.
The world is a harsh mistress.
Yeah. I mean, some people are lucky in that they're somehow insulated from that. Well, that was the story of the Buddha, wasn't it? He was a prince and he left the palace and he saw all the suffering in the streets. And he said, what's going on? He didn't understand. He'd lived for, like, I think till he's 21 in the palace. And then he had a rude awakening. So he sought to seek the causes of suffering.
You created your own sigil, didn't you?
Yes.
Appropriate for a self-made man with so many songs to sing.
I'm glad you like it. Some people are fortunate enough to be born into the right